Check out the full story on Amazon. Link in the description below. To my relief, Kyle was still alive and still in the house, but he was also very drunk. We had ditched the pickup truck in the middle of the woods halfway back to the house, and Zach and I walked the rest of the way back. And sleepy as hell, I passed out on the couch. With a splitting headache, I woke up on the couch the next morning. Today I hoped would be a normal day. At least, that was my goal. No Wendigos, monsters, giant sea monsters, or evil shadow organizations. I'd made a schedule. 9 a.m, wake up, make coffee, and eat a shitty breakfast. 9:50, hide all the beer Kyle bought, from Kyle, and practice with my sword. 10:30, head into town, buy groceries, and get a nice shotgun because too much weird shit shows up way too often. 3 p.m, head to Zach's house and practice with my new gun and look around the property. 5 p.m, go back home, take a nap, and have the rest of the weekend to myself. For the most part, I followed the routine without any problems. The morning part went fine. I woke up, practiced with my sword, and headed into town. The town consisted of 5 streets connecting into several intersections, movie theaters, stores, and a grocery store lining the roadside beside the sidewalk. This particular day was pretty bright, so a lot of people were outside. And the more people, the more aggressive attitude. Another thing I may have neglected to mention is the details of the townsfolk. Most of the people are what you would call rednecks. About 70% of the townsfolk are either hunters, outdoorsmen, or fishermen, and the other 30% consisted of naked crab-walking crackheads who need water fountains to wipe their asses. And I guess I fell into the first category. I went to the next location of my routine. Earl's Convenience. Now, considering I was a local at Earl's Convenience, I had been away for a long time. But I guess I was busy fighting monsters and doing a bunch of other insane stuff I would have laughed my arse off hearing about 2 months ago. So I guess Earl was surprised when he saw me walk into the store, wearing nothing but clothes and a smile.
"Roger, I thought you were dead."
I stopped and laughed. Yeah, I get that a lot.
"Where have you been?"
I was expecting this kind of question, so I came prepared. I was chasing a giant sea monster for the last month, and I also got stranded on a desert island, and I may have killed a giant elephant snake somewhere along the way. But the truth was way too crazy to be taken seriously, so I didn't expect what Earl said next.
"Wait, what did you just say at the end there?"
I was still standing in front of the cashier desk, holding my groceries and an energy drink. That I was busy running away from a giant zombie, dear? Earl stopped for a moment.
"You've seen it too? Holy shit, I'm not crazy! Okay, for the first few days, something that looked like a deer was crossing my backyard, and sometimes it opens its mouth and it makes a sound like a fucking crying baby. Last night I saw it again, but it looked like it was running away from something, and it had all these bullet holes all over his body, and one of its forearms was ripped off. It looked like someone had shot it with an assault rifle and then an elephant rifle or something."
I couldn't believe how unawarely accurate Earl was on the specifics of what had happened the previous night, when Zach and I had battled the Wendigo he had named Skinny. Oh yeah, that might have been me.
"What?"
Nothing. Never mind.
"So, have you seen anything like this? I know this town is pumped full of weird shit, but this is the first time I've seen a Wendigo, and the weirdest part is that someone shot it. Have any idea what's going on?"
Nope, I lied. Then I paid for my groceries and left. Before I could finish my routine list, I somehow got dragged into one of Zach's everyday jobs. Just after I had left the convenience store and got into my car, I received a call from Zach. "Hello?"
"Roger, get the hell over in my house. Now. We need to leave."
"Why? Can't I just finish getting my groceries?"
"No. One of my contacts in Washington just stopped Lawrence, that weird-ass scientist mafia king. all the way in Washington, going to a high school called Algoma High on lockdown in Aurora City of middle of fucking nowhere, and from the looks of it, something fishy is going on in there.
Maybe his real name is Mo Lester. I laughed. Then I realized something. My brother's son and my nephew Christopher attended that school. I'd never actually been to that school, but from what Christopher said at a family reunion, that place was a gangster shitstorm.
Wait, my nephew goes to that fucking school. Why aren't there any police doing anything?
Because there's some sort of unbreakable black gunk covering the whole damn place, and no phone signals can get in or out of the school. Oh, your nephew goes there, so are you coming or not? The plane leaves in 2 hours.
Sure. Grab your guns. Away from home, in another Pacific Northwest state, Zach and I left our car we had rented, armed to the teeth, and got off at the back parking lot of the school. I was carrying the Italian death stick, a Benelli M4, and Zach was carrying his good old AR. This the place?
Sure seems like it.
No high school I know was covered in black gunk from the inside. Zach was right. The school was fairly large and had 3 floors, with an old sign that read, Algoma High, nailed above the door. Some kind of thick and gooey black gunk was completely covering the inside of the doors and windows, blocking off all the exits and entries. But we had all the firepower needed to no doubt be able to break through this black crap. Zach reached into the trunk of the pickup truck and pulled out a cold steel battering ram, then smashed the door a couple of times. When that didn't work, he asked me for my shotgun.
Cover your ears, he said.
Zach pressed the muzzle of the gun against the hinges of the door. Then he fired. He did the same with all the rusted hinges and the doorknob. The door fell down all on its own, revealing a thick wall of black gunk tightly sewn together to form some kind of wall blocking us from getting inside. When shooting through the wall of black gunk didn't work, I poured an entire bucket of gasoline on it, then set it on fire. The fire surprisingly destroyed it. Like magic, we loaded our guns and stepped into the school, which was, surprisingly, lit up by hallway lights. We kept the door open for a quick getaway, then walked into one of the main hallways branching deeper into the eerily empty school. I silently opened one of the classroom doors, and to my utter surprise, I saw an angler in the classroom, dragging a bleeding teenager out of it. It dropped the kid and screeched, but Zach and I put a quick end to it with pain and lead.
Anglers? How the living hell are they out here? We're hundreds of miles away from the ocean.
Remember what I said? Zach asked, checking his magazine. There are marine underground cave systems that lead from the ocean and branch out into dry land, with underground lakes and deep streams. There must be some kind of underground cave underneath the school. Watch out. There's probably more than one angler in this school. I nodded and continued walking down the classroom. After clearing all the classrooms that had somehow been emptied of all the kids, we ended up at the cafeteria. It was empty, just like the rest of the high school, and covered with the black gunk and goo. I heard something crashing from the kitchen, and I aimed there. Get ready. After a painfully long amount of silence, Zach and I had put our guard down and were about to leave and check the rest of the school, when I got tackled from behind. It was an angler, but this one was weirder. It was larger and more insectoid than a normal angler, with sharp appendages acting as legs instead of tentacles. It pinned me down and opened its mouth to bite down straight on my face, when I heard the welcoming sound of a sub-automatic assault rifle, as Zach's gun tore a dozen bullet holes into the angler's back.
Holy shit!
I yelled, pushing the dead monster off of me. I haven't seen an angler that looks like that. Neither have I. Must be a new subspecies that only lives in the caves. We walked out the cafeteria and down the hallway until we heard the yelling from the 3rd floor. When we went up there and checked, to our surprise, there was another group of 30-something kids, and who appeared to be the principal. a guy with a beard and a military dog tag. They were all tied up with cheap rope, and we immediately freed them with our knives. "Who are you?"
Holy shit, my back's killing me. Name's Marlo. Are you guys the police?
Marlo asked. "No. We're taking care of things." "Why are you here? Do you have any idea what these things are?" I answered. A fugitive and a psychopath somehow broke into this high school, and we need to find him. He might have something to do with this. I'll tell you everything that happened. I promise I'll help you." "Fine." We walked inside the classroom and sat down on some chairs, and we got the stares from the class, reasonably. Zach and I sat down on the opposite side of Marlo, and he began talking. "A week or some more ago, we had a construction project in the basement of our school. It uncovered a huge cave system and awoken whatever laid below, which are the monsters right now. A 10th grade class somehow managed to make weapons, fight the monsters, and make their way to my office, and we've stayed here ever since, with some of the surviving psycho kids and a weird old guy who's in some cult called the Order of Colossal, trying to kidnap and sacrifice students to the drones. Fucking assholes, I tell you. The Order of Colossal," Zach murmured. "I think this is the person we're looking for. Where'd you last see him?" "I don't know. We were kidnapped in our sleep. Lawrence is a shithead. They all left a minute ago, like they're in some kind of hurry." Zach and I stood up and headed for the door. "Thanks for the help. If you and the students want to get out of here, there's a back door that's busted open." A look of complete surprise washed over Marlo's face. "How did you get through the black gooey stuff? My 50 cal couldn't even get through that shit." "Have you tried flames and flammables to destroy the barriers?" "Oh, damn." I opened the door. "Well, like we said, thanks for your help, but we don't have much time. We're running tight on a schedule." Zach and I walked out of the room and headed for the basement, the only place we hadn't checked. Halfway there, we heard an enormous explosion from beneath us, and the ground shook, the smell of smoke permeating my nostrils. "Let's fucking move!" I yelled. Finally reaching the basement, I turned the knob and swung the door open and looked around. The large and dimly lit basement was like a hive, covered in the black goo and Swiss cheese with holes, organic stalagmites and black catacombs. All around us were dead anglers. There was a large hole in the middle of the basement, leading down into the cave. Zach and I walked down the deep tunnel for a few minutes, leading into the cave system itself, and turned our flashlights on. The tunnel eventually opened up into a massive room, covered in the black goo, designed like some sort of hive. There was also a large underwater lake in the middle, sizzling. In the middle of the huge cave room were imprints of a large explosion, and the smouldering remains of some very large organism, and the surrounding anglers. I heard someone running out of the place, and I turned to see Lawrence sneaking past us and running out of the cave and into the basement, long gone before we realized what was happening. "Shit, he's gone!" Leaning against the cave wall, unconscious, was Christopher and his best friend, Blaine, who I'd seen him getting into trouble with a couple of times. As Christopher slowly regained his consciousness, he stood up with his friend and looked surprised when he saw me. Zach was standing a few meters away from them. Uncle Roger? What the hell? How'd you get here?" "Dog, this is your uncle?" Blaine asked, pointing to me, the 25-year-old Caucasian guy holding a shotgun. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked Christopher. "Yeah, who's your friend?" Zach grinned and tipped his fedora. "Name's Zach, kid." "I guess Uncle Roger's a monster hunter now. Don't tell your dad that, though," I said, patting Christopher on the shoulder. "Tell me everything that happened." So past everything Marlo said, there was some kind of queen or alpha angler that was the mastermind of every monster crawling around the school. If they didn't kill it, the monsters would spread throughout the whole town, killing everyone, and Lawrence and the crazy cult members were helping the monsters. So, long story short, 55 gallons of gasoline and a lot of lead took care of the problem in one epic final battle. We got out of the school, and Christopher and Blame regrouped with everyone else waiting in the school's parking lot. Marlowe was talking to one of the men in suits. Now, I'm going to be vague about this whole thing and call them some organization. The government men were part of an organization Zach's organization worked with regularly. They took care of everything, talked with the police and sent the kids home, burned the black gunk off the walls with flamethrowers, and covered up the whole thing. Christopher's dad, my brother, met me at the parking lot. Now, despite what shitty Netflix drama shows will say, I didn't have a bad relationship with my brother, Michael Rogers. I was just that weird, yet cool, please believe that, uncle at family reunions, who lived in another state and had a weird job. Zach and I were in the parking lot when Michael spotted me.
"Roger," Michael said. "Long time no see, eh?"
I tried to hide my shotgun in my long coat, but the stock noticeably stuck out of the neck collar.
"Yeah, how have you been?" "Good. Do you know what happened here? The cops won't tell me shit, and my Christopher keeps talking about some monster bullshit."
It was a gas leak, my friend told me. It got into the classrooms and made the students hallucinate, and they couldn't leave the classrooms or the smoke and fumes would kill them. I guess the internet connection didn't work, because the police weren't notified until the parents thought something was wrong. Mike looked like what I was saying was absolute bullshit, but most normal adults tend to go towards the more rational side of things. At this point, I didn't know what rational was.
"Okay. At least Christopher's okay.
How's Mum and Dad?"
"Oh, just the same old, same old." "By the way, why are you here?"
That caught me off guard.
I kind of got a new job.
My friend Zach." I turned to Zach, who was yelling at the Indian internet support technician on the other side of the line. "It specializes in this stuff. Christopher was here, so I decided to tag along for the ride, and here I am."
"Okay,"
Michael said.
"Well, it was great seeing you, Roger. Stay safe, okay? And don't get into whatever shit you're about to get into."
Zach walked behind me. "Lawrence was just seen heading back to Oregon in a Mercedes. Let's roll. This might turn into a fucking car chase if we don't take the plane back home." "Well, duty calls. See ya." I walked up to Michael's car with Christopher sitting in the back seat, and I quickly said to him, "The monsters in the school are a colony of semi-humanoid creatures originating from the eastern Pacific Ocean. Can get up to 16 feet long, and I've killed one a few weeks back. Catch you later, dude." Before Christopher could ask some more stupid-ass questions, I quickly slammed the car door shut and hopped in Zach's rented car as Michael gave me a look. "What the hell was that?" he asked as we drove our way to the airport. I called out, "You'll never know." After the ordeal and my mismatched family reunion, we were back in Oregon, in our little seaside town. I was back in my car, determined to finish what I had started. The routine. I smiled as I checked off groceries on my list. Next, I went to the gun store, which was nothing more than an outdoor store with a bunch of rifles in the back. The store itself was mostly messy, tents, fishing rods, hunting gear lining the walls and floor. The cashier was a man in his early 30s who was wearing an orange trucker cap, and he was decked out in full camo. The man sighed and looked up, where I stood on the other side of the counter. "Can I help you?" I smiled my cheesy smile that makes people want to beat the shit out of me, and said, "Actually, you can. You guys got any..." I looked at the piece of paper where I had written, "Pump Action Mossberg 500 Shotgun," with a Sharpie. "Mossberg 500 shotguns?" "Yeah, follow me." The man left the cash register, opened a door, and went into a room behind the cash register. The room was large, and honestly, I was expecting something like the gun shopping scene from John Wick, Chapter 2. But the really disappointing thing is, the room was like the interior of a normal garage, except about 1 million guns and crossbows were hanging from the wall. The man walked over to the shotgun racks, selected one, and walked back and showed me. Is this what you want? The shotgun was sleek and black, but unlike most of the others, this one was a sawn-off shotgun. If you're not familiar with firearms and the sort, a sawn-off shotgun is like a regular one, except the long part of the barrel of the shotgun has been sawn off, making it lighter and more compact. Yeah, this is it, I said. I looked at the second thing Zach had written. Dragon breath shells. You got any dragon's breath ammo? The man looked at me like I was insane. Then he shot me a suspicious look. I didn't like where this was going. What are you even planning on doing with this gun? Hunting? He laughed like a total asshole. Look, if you know a single thing about big game hunting, it's that you don't take flame-ejected ammo into the woods when you hunt. It's a huge fire risk. So what are you planning to use this shotgun for? That's when I knew I was busted. The man was now suspicious. I needed to end this, quickly, before he asked any more questions. It was something I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do it. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the exact thing I had brought for this kind of situation. I suddenly walked over to the man and thrust $200 bills into the man's hand. I didn't want to do this. It was $200 out of my pocket. But I expected this, and I decided to prepare before I came here. He looked surprised. I smiled and patted the guy on the back. Hey, I'll let you keep the $200 if you shut up and sell me the shotgun. And if you try to run off with my money, I'll either just steal the shotgun or detonate the 60 remote grenades I planted all over the store, and you and your car. Relax, the last part was a joke. I'm not a terrorist. Okay. We walked back to the cash register, and I paid for the shotgun and the 2 boxes of ammo. One full of regular shotgun shells, and the other with Dragon's Breath shotgun ammo. As I left the store, I yelled over my shoulder to the bewildered store client, Hey, that bomb thing was a joke. Don't tell your boss. I sighed a sigh of relief as I walked out of that store. I hopped into my shitty pickup truck, and I looked at the gas meter. It was almost empty. Luckily, I still had enough gas to get to the gas station next to the edge of town. And oh boy, it was shitty. The gas station was on the side of the road next to the town's exit, near to the expanse of willow trees. I parked beside the gas pumps, and after I was done pumping gas into my car, I walked into the gas station convenience store to get some jerky and an extra can. Despite how many times I had come to this gas station, the only gas station in town, I'd only been in the actual gas station convenience store once. Most of the time, I just paid for the gas at the pumps, and only went inside a few occasions. After I'd gotten the extra can of gas and jerky, I walked over to the counter where a skinny guy wearing an employee shirt sat behind the counter, sitting on a stool and reading a book. He didn't look up from his book. Hey, I said. He finally did look up. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and by the looks of it, he wanted to end the conversation as soon as possible. I need to pay for these, I sighed. After he rang me up, I grabbed my shit and walked back to my truck. So I guess this was proof that the people in this town are weird. Even if I was weird. I was the dumbass college graduate, the only one in the town, who enjoyed getting involved with things that people shouldn't get involved with. I looked at the next thing on my list, Zach's house. I called Zach to let him know I was coming. Nice, you got the exact shotgun, Zach said as I showed him the brand new shotgun, which I named Bob. Zach lived in a cozy cottage at the forested edge of town, where no one could hear any gunshots or screams. He had a massive backyard that was surrounded by an enormous forest, and in the middle of his backyard, Zach had built a miniature shooting range with wooden targets propped up everywhere. Funnily enough, Zach had almost built a dummy Wendigo using a plastic deer skull and an old bullet-riddled mannequin. It had just rained, so it was the perfect time to shoot the incendiary rounds, aka Dragon's Breath bullets. I loaded up my shotgun for the very first time and I aimed it at the dummy Wendigo. I pulled the trigger for the very first time, and instantly, a 50-foot-long burst of sparks and flames erupted from the shotgun's barrel and decimated the target. "That was fucking awesome," I said. We spent the rest of the day skeet shooting, and everything was fine and dandy until Skinny showed up for round 3. Out of nowhere, we heard footsteps rapidly approaching, until the Wendigo burst from the tree line. Come on, I wanted today to be normal. Turns out, shit was only beginning to get serious. Skinny looked different somehow. His, I assume the Wendigo was male, missing forearm was now replaced with an enormous metal prosthetic arm, complete with 5 fingers, and sharp metal protrusions coming out of them. And the worst part was that the claws looked more like 12-inch metal blades. Half of Skinny's deer skull face was replaced by a metal version of his original, with one of his eye sockets glowing red, and a massive chunk of Skinny's left shoulder was missing, replaced by multiple metal joints and thick wires. And I mean all of Skinny's shoulder. So now we weren't just up against a regular Wendigo, a creature that's already very dangerous. We were now against a spawn of hell, aka a cyborg-modified Wendigo. And someone had done this. Someone had healed and upgraded Skinny, and I had a pretty good idea who. I sighed as Skinny charged at us. I nonchalantly said, "Dude, it looks like the fucking Terminator. Shoot it?" Zach nodded and aimed. "Yeah, shoot it." I gave him a nod, and we fired. Now here's something to consider. I was using Dragon's Breath bullets, and Zach was using normal shotgun rounds. And when I shot Skinny, a light show of sparks and flames instantly smashed into his face, and Skinny fell flat on his face. I considered stopping fire to see if Skinny would get back up, but as Zach always said, a dead Wendigo is always better than a live one. Zach and I started slam firing into Skinny's back, sending sprays of bullets, sparks, and flames into him. The light from the dragon bullets got so bright I had to close my eyes. When we were finally out of ammo and reloading, I stole a glance at Skinny. I should have expected what I've seen next. Skinny slowly got back up, the sounds of popping and cracking joints filling the quiet air. Skinny stood up, shook himself, and started walking back towards us like the bullets hadn't even hit him. This bitch was now bulletproof. Should I get the 50 cal? Yeah, but it might shatter a few things if we're firing inside the house, but fuck it. We ran inside the cabin, locking all the doors behind us. Thanks to the precious tour of the house, I knew where all the guns were kept. And oh boy, they were big guns. I opened the gun cabinet and I pulled out the prize. An enormous .50 caliber elephant rifle, almost as large as me. From what I knew about the guns, 50 cals were some of the strongest rifles you could legally buy. So if this didn't kill Skinny, well, we were going to die. I loaded the gun and tossed it to Zach. By the time Skinny had broken down the back door of the cabin, we were already lying in wait, holding the guns. Skinny entered the house, and before he knew it, Zach shot him. The enormous gun had sent giant shockwaves in the air, and my ears were ringing. It was loud. The Wendigo screeched in pain and stumbled, but it didn't fall. It stabilized itself, turned, and looked back at us. The 50-point caliber elephant rifle. Zach's biggest and most powerful gun ever. So we, to put it simply, were screwed. After I slam-fired bullets into Skinny with Zach's other shotgun, I grabbed mine and I ran to Zach's car. I jumped into Zach's pickup truck, and before I could yell something incoherent, we were already speeding down the road. "Is it after us?" "Yeah, it is." Skinny was running after us, and the strange thing was, Wendigos aren't as fast as cars going 80 miles per hour. I mean, Wendigos are still fast as hell, but they can't run 80 miles per hour. So Skinny was somehow modified to be able to keep up with our car and exceed his physical capabilities. Great. Zach, he's still after us. I think he's catching up." "I can see that," he replied. Without warning, Zach slowed the truck to 20 miles an hour, made a fast, sloppy U-turn, and when we were facing the charging Wendigo, Zach sped up and straight up rammed into Skinny. I felt the bump, and I banged my elbow on the window, and shit, that hurt. We completely ran over the Wendigo, and once it was down, we ran over it a couple more times. Then we peeled out of there. When I looked into the rearview mirror, I saw Skinny slowly get up and look at us, as I stuck my middle finger up at him and laughed to myself. Since Zach's house and the entire surrounding area was off limits for a while, due to the cyborg deer monster, we had no other choice but to head into town. While we drove, I called Kyle to let him know that Skinny was back and that he should keep an eye out, and a gun. "So," I said as we drove down one of the country roads leading to town, "where are we going?" "A place where you can get better guns." "I thought you said that the 50 cal was your strongest gun, and that the gun store doesn't have anything big enough to kill Skinny." "We're not going to the gun store because I know a guy who has better weapons." Turns out, this mystery weapon guy lives in a mansion in a huge field in the middle of nowhere. We walked up to the front steps and rang the doorbell, and from somewhere inside the house, footsteps slowly came closer to the door. A giant of a man walked out. He was even taller than Zach, with a short grey beard and a prosthetic leg. Based on how he walked, he had lost his leg a long time ago.
"Hey, Zach! Come in, how are you?"
"Hey, Sergio," Zach said as he walked inside the house. "Good to see you." Despite the 20-year age difference between the two men, Sergio and Zach acted as if they had known each other since kindergarten. Sergio looked at me.
"Who's your friend?"
"Oh, I'm Roger," I said, shaking Sergio's enormous hand. The inside of the house was amazing. We walked into an enormous living room where several massive fish tanks were sat on large tables, and to my amazement, swimming inside one of the fish tanks was a coelacanth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, coelacanths are rare prehistoric fish that previously believed to have gone extinct 300 million years ago. The walls of the entire living room were decorated with trophies, but not like normal trophies, like those big gold cups. These were more like hunting trophies. Ugh. But instead of enormous heads of deer and other big game mounted on walls, the various taxidermied heads of multiple strange creatures hung from the mounted wooden platforms. I recognized the heads of some of the creatures. A couple of taxidermied Wendigo and Skinwalker heads, a Grootslang head, the head of an enormous crocodile-like monster, and much more. "Did you hunt all of these monsters?" I asked Sergio. "Sure did, son. You see that thing?" He pointed at the giant crocodilian head I was staring at earlier. "That's a macara. I hunted that beast back in the 80s. "Cool shit." Zach sat down on a couch and began to explain why we came here.
Sergio?"
"Yeah."
"When you killed that giant Wendigo a couple years ago, you used an anti-tank 50 cal round to kill it, right?"
"Yeah? Why?"
Zach grimaced. "I know this sounds like dumb shit, but just before we came here with my friend Roger, we were attacked by a Wendigo. But not just any normal Wendigo. It was huge, and when it first charged, we slam-fired into it with shotguns, but it just got back up. And the weirdest part was that this Wendigo looks robotic. Yesterday, when the same Wendigo attacked us, it was perfectly normal. But today, when I returned, it had all these wires and metal parts covering half its body. And when all those shotgun bullets didn't work, I shot that thing with my 50-point cal. But it didn't do shit. That Wendigo just got up. We temporarily subdued it when I ran it over my truck."
Sergio frowned.
You said this thing shook off a 50 caliber round?"
Zach replied.
"Yeah. You have anything more effective?"
Sergio grinned.
"I don't know what dumb shit you two have got yourselves into, but I have just the weapon for this occasion.
And if this doesn't work, well, you're fucked. And with that, Sergio motioned us to follow him, and we went down to his basement and turned on the light. It was fucking amazing.